Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Thursday, September 25th, 2025. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist Matthew Connetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And social commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
So in the world in which half of intellectual elite opinion goes one way and half goes the other, Donald Trump went before the UN on Tuesday morning and gave a speech that was either the most embarrassing speech ever delivered by an American, we're ashamed, we're a laughingstock, we're fools, we're idiots, or from another perspective, it was absolutely fantastic. And I wonder if you can guess which camp I find myself in. I have actually read it twice. I enjoyed it so much, including the weaving, where he weaves in a really interesting anecdote about how he bid on renovating the UN and said he could do it with really great materials as opposed to crappy terrazzo for an eighth of what they ended up paying for it, and that he even went and testified before some congressional committee to talk about the UN cost overruns that were the result of him not getting the job. And what's funny about that anecdote is, A, it sounds perfectly true, and B, that he did manage to put it all together with something that had happened to him just before he came on, which is that, somebody shut off the escalator just before he was going to get on it to go up to the General Assembly, to the chamber, whatever you call the UN carnival of horrors that is the big room that they're in. And then, of course, his speech was not on the teleprompter. So this is the level at which the UN has descended into clownery. Most important politician, most powerful person in the world, they're like, we're going to shut off your escalator and not let you read your speech from the teleprompter. And he used these facts and his own experience with the UN to say, you don't know what you're doing. You're a ridiculous organization. You're an embarrassment. You have failed on your high principles. And we alone here in the United States are delivering results that will make the world safer. It was ambrosia and nectar, well, as far as I'm concerned.
A couple of things. The first is we should say that the UN denies responsibility for the broken escalator as Escalator Gate spirals into another scandal. The UN claims that one of Trump's videographers apparently tripped the security override while he was filming Trump going up the escalator, and that's what stopped the escalator. Now, the White House, both President Trump and White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, vehemently deny this. So we still don't know the answer, but Trump has called for arrests I'm not making this up, on his Truth account as they look into the escalator scandal. Also, fascinating, one of those Hegelian ironies of history, this escalator was going up, whereas the most famous escalator in the world, a few blocks away in Trump Tower, Trump was going down. So just an interesting kind of parallelism there, or
10
actually
years,
not parallelism.
10 years, 3 months earlier.
Direction.
That's
yes.
right, yeah.
So my second point is, if we know one thing, John, we know that you don't get enough credit. And I just want to say on your behalf that on the podcast before we took the break and before this speech happened, you speculated that by the end of this term, the United States might no longer be in the United Nations. And I have to say, everything that Trump said from the dais pointed in that direction. He kind of laid out the bill of particulars on how the UN has completely failed, that it's only an anti-Israel organization, anti-American organization, waste of money, waste of space. And this, I think, just lays the groundwork for an eventual U.S. exit, just as the United States has exited from other post-World War II institutions we helped create, but which now, 80 some years later, have been either shown to be irrelevant or co-opted by our adversaries.
Christine, I was struck by one thing about the speech and Trump's demeanor and previous Republican presidents speaking before the UN, which is to say, Trump was Trump. You know, he was vulgar. He said, we have the greatest economy ever. But he talked about, as I say, talked about how he would have done marble instead of terrazzo. All of that stuff that you look at and you say from the outside, well, that's very unpresidential. This is really a key moment. Every year, the president comes and speaks to the UN to elucidate our highest ideals and represent that the United States wants to be a leader in the international community and wants to lead by example and all of that. And Trump, of course, will have none of it. He says, we are leading. I am leading. I don't care about any of you and what your niceties are. I'm getting results. I was thinking that Reagan and Bush in particular, second Bush, not first Bush, would come before the UN and deliver beautiful, heartfelt, powerful, rhetorically significant speeches. And what did the world say about them? They're cowboys. They want to bring a nuclear war. They're crazy Christian zealots who are looking to blow the planet up. You know, they don't deserve to be president. They're crazy. And to the extent that those speeches were implicitly a way to answer those criticisms by saying, no, you've got this all wrong. We are the highest of high water. We are intellectually serious. We embrace the importance of talk and negotiation and all of that. I don't know what benefit it served either Reagan or Bush to play that game to an audience in that room and to an audience in the international elite opinion foreign policy columnist community, because they got no respect in the end from those people until they left office. And Trump isn't interested in their respect. Is that a decline of Western civilization problem, or is it a recognition or an acknowledgement that as people who are supporters of Trump and don't like the old Republican style would say, he's done supplicating the people who disrespect people who think the way we do?
Well, I think, look, I've been perfectly happy to be critical of the way Trump delivers some of his remarks in certain contexts, but it's also his political superpower that he is always himself, whether he's at a memorial service in a stadium, whether he's in front of the UN, or whether he's, kind of riffing with reporters outside the West Wing. So that is something that it's that authenticity, which we were talking about last week a little bit. But in this case, it's actually a very conservative thing he's done, which is to point to this international institution, which conservatives have long criticized for overreach, for anti-Israel sentiment, for its utter moral rottenness with regard to human rights, and say there's no there, and just stand up there and talk about the terrazzo, but also, interestingly, say in very blunt and straightforward ways what his MAGA message is here at home, which is immigration, the green, he's talking about the green tech revolution and what it's done to many of the countries that have embraced it wholeheartedly. But I thought he was himself in a way that pointed to some of the failings, largely in Europe. I think a lot of his conversation was actually, in that speech, was focused on Europe. So I found it, because I am no fan of the United Nations, I thought it was refreshing. And in this sense, I think you're right, that the people who argue that sometimes you need a rule breaker to come in and state clearly how just terrible some of these institutions have become, he was that guy. And I think when Bush and Reagan and other presidents have stood before the UN trying to play the game, and you're right to call it a game, it's not just that nobody gave them respect, it's that no one remembers anything they said. And people will likely remember the more brash kind of off-the-cuff remarks that Trump made, but he's correct in all of the criticisms he has made of the institution. I also think it's very important that we give a little shout out to the First Lady, who was the first one up the escalator and already on an incline and in high heels when it came to a screeching halt, and she kept her balance. So I'm just putting that out there. Good job, Melania.
She also blew the whistle on the teleprompter gate because, according to Trump, after he was done speaking, he went down into the gallery and asked Melania how he did, and she said, "I couldn't hear a word of it." So there were audio issues, there was teleprompter issues, there was the escalator, all symbolizing kind of the decrepitude of the UN. And I just want to make another point on the energy piece, which Christine highlights. I thought it was very interesting that Trump would spend so much time lambasting the Green New Deal. Of course, his criticisms of kind of climate science hyperbole are now a decade old, but talking about the importance of all sorts of energy, including carbon-based energy, for economic growth. And what happened the next day? China came out and said, the Green New Deal is the way of the future, and we are pledging to cut our emissions. And instead of kind of the denunciations in the press that greeted Trump's speech, the Chinese statement was sung to the skies by the press and praised and said, "Oh, look what great China." Just goes to say, just to show there are two kind of futures available, I think, for the world, in particular Europe, which is Europe could follow what Trump is advising and crack down on immigration in order to kind of quell the cultural disquiet that's leading to these populist upsurges. And it could fix its energy systems, which are kind of beholden to the Green New Deal concept. And as a result, Europe is Europe is deindustrialized, right? And its economy has kind of collapsed over, especially in comparison to the United States. And what has it become? It's in danger of just becoming another kind of appendage to Eurasia and to China, right? But that's what China wants. That's why China is holding this Green New Deal strategy up, even as Trump contrasts and criticizes it.
So to move on to the other piece that was so important in this speech, Europe is also essentially, while it is at war with Russia on Ukraine, in theory, or NATO is acting as though they are an antagonist in this war with Russia, they are supporting Russia through their purchases of Russian oil, which is something that the United States under Trump has been pressuring them very hard to stop doing, them and India, both. Like, impoverish Russia. That's one of the ways in which this war can stop. And Europe's shame in this bizarre circumstance in which Trump and everybody, I think rightly, has been treated with some scorn for the way he was talking about the war between Russia and Ukraine in the first 9 months of his administration. The Europeans talk a good game and say that they're going to support Ukraine, and this is the most important thing of our time, but they will not do anything to halt their effective subsidy of the Russian war machine through their purchase of Russian oil. And Trump is saying, hey, we're producing natural gas out the wazoo. Maybe you could too. How do we know what natural gas deposits you might be able to find, or what kind of markets you might be able to create, or whatever? And you're not even looking there, and you are perpetuating the very war you want to cease. And then came this thing.
I just want to interject one point on that, which is that if you go back to Trump's first term, it's also important to note that for all the talk about the Russiagate and what does Putin have on Trump and Trump loves Putin, Trump was on this same beating on the same drum back then. Remember, there was this face-to-face meeting with European leaders, the Germans that Trump had, where he lectured them during his first administration about oil business with Vladimir Putin and what are they doing and when are they going to stop. And that was treated as like rude and it's terrible affront. He's been clear about that for a very long time, since before the invasion.
So to talk about the invasion and Trump and this remarkable about face that he made on Monday before the speech, met with Volodymyr Zelensky. He said, "You're incredibly brave." He said, "Your people are putting up a hell of a fight." And he said, "I don't know, maybe you can win." Right? 6 months ago, he was like, "You don't have the cards. You better sue for peace," in that horrible meeting in the Oval Office in which J.D. Vance was, being like the evil puppeteer or the provocateur. I don't know what's going on there. It's very hard to understand what the internal mechanisms are of the administration in relations to war in Ukraine. Well, this was not something I expected was going to come out of his mouth.
I don't think I expected it either, but there were some, intervening steps we should probably,
of course,
point out as well between the Oval Office meeting
right
in the winter and then this remarkable statement at the UN. The major interval was, of course, the Anchorage summit between Trump and Putin, where Trump basically came away saying, well, we think we have a deal, for a ceasefire, and really it's going to be up to Putin and Zelensky to meet and discuss. And, of course, as people might have predicted, Putin had no interest in such a meeting. He's still very much interested in this war ending with Ukraine's surrender. And instead of any diplomatic proceeding, Putin has not only continued his attacks on Ukraine's civilian population, but he's now escalating. And there have been a series of incursions by Russian drones and by Russian aircraft into NATO countries, Estonia, Poland, Denmark, and I believe either Bulgaria or Romania. And so this is alarming everyone. And at the same time, Ukraine has become very effective at its targeting Russia's oil-producing infrastructure. And so the actual conduct of the war or condition of the war is rather uncertain. Russia continues to make gains on the ground in some places. In other areas in Ukraine, it seems that it's either not doing as well or actually being pushed back by some Ukrainian forces. But in this larger kind of missile campaign, Russia's taking some big hits to its war machine. And I think Trump was, one, angry at Putin for not living up to whatever potential Trump sees in him for whatever reason. And two, has been informed about the rickety nature of the Russian economy and the oil engine that drives it. And this has produced this rhetorical barrage. Not only did Trump come out and say, both with Zelensky and then in this epic Truth Social post after the meeting, that Ukraine can take back all of its territory and that we're going to continue to sell weapons to NATO, which will then give them to Russia. Trump said on multiple occasions to reporters that the next time a Russian aircraft violates NATO airspace, NATO should shoot down the aircraft. So this is speaking loudly. But as always, the question is it a big stick or is it a twig that Trump is going to use with Putin? And so the rhetoric has been maximalized here, but he still hasn't said he's going to, for example, clear the path for the sanctions bill in the Senate or lay down any of the sectoral tariffs that he's been threatening for some time.
Please,
the question of the big stick or the twig, I think, is important, and I think there's a way to actually look at it more sort of fact granularly, which is is Trump trolling Putin with this stuff, or does he believe it? Does he now? Because as he said in his Truth Social post, he thinks Ukraine can win. Does he think that? Does he really believe that? Or is he trying to poke Putin into a response to once again get somewhere near coming to the table and all that business? I'm not sure. The language was, I mean, the post could have been written by me. I mean, it's the kind of thing, that I've been arguing for ages, where Trump said Russia has been unable to accomplish what a real power could have accomplished in 2 weeks, which is an accurate assessment of the way that Russia has fought this war.
Look,
but it's
thing,
also,
name,
can I just add, it was such an example of Trump. Foreign policy to him is deal making. It's that simple. And so when he sees his opponent losing some ground or losing some power, then the deal changes. So then he can tell the smaller states that Russia is bullying. And we should add Moldova to that, because there's the prime minister came out and said, there's a lot of Russian activity going on in our borders, trying to disrupt our country. He is just throwing stuff out there all the time. And, Poland in particular has been quite, I think Radek Sikorski responded to Trump's claim about if they come into your airspace, you should shoot them down with a, yeah, roger that. I mean, so the rhetoric is definitely becoming more inflamed, but I'm with Abe in questioning whether that leads, what action that will lead to, because if he still has as his goal the deal that he can then go in front of the UN next year and boast about having stopped a war, then he's going to have to start applying some real pressure here, because this is not, Russia can still, although weakened, can still continue to grind along. And Zelensky has been signaling, he said something with regard to, there's a special weapon I've requested from the United States, and they're considering that. And so there's a lot of shifting going on in terms of what the Trump administration is perhaps now going to promise to give.
I think the weapon is a missile that can hit Moscow, because we've been limiting their the range. And the second thing is the win back the territory is important. Even though it's all rhetoric, it is important, because what were we talking about around the time of the Alaska summit? We were talking about land swaps. That was what they were proposing at that time, is that Ukraine would get some territory back, but Russia would get some other territory, probably Donetsk in the east. This was, land swaps are off the table now. And so it does introduce a wild card into the game. Whether it's trolling, I don't know, but it definitely kind of takes us to a different place diplomatically than where we've been for a month.
What name have we heard in the last 2 weeks, who's a person's name, that we have not been hearing for the last 6 months when we've been talking about Ukraine? That is the name of our envoy to the war in Ukraine, Keith Kellogg. When we talk about what's going on in the administration in relation to Ukraine, we are talking about Trump, and we're talking about Vance. We're talking about stuff inside the White House between the new right or the woke right.
And Witkoff.
And Witkoff, excuse me, right. So Witkoff, but Witkoff, of course, does not have an ideological valence or a view.
And
like
he
Witkoff
deals with Putin. He doesn't really deal with Zelensky all that much.
I think Kellogg, along with facts on the ground, if you read understandingwar.org, our friends Kim and Fred Kagan's website that covers this war on a daily basis, the facts of this war are that it's grinding and awful in every possible way, and that, casualty levels, particularly at the civilian level, are increasing, and it's wearing and awful and horrible, and that the Russians are not winning. I mean, they're not losing exactly. We're in some horrible, nightmarish standoff. But 6 months ago, when Trump said to Zelensky in the White House, you don't have the cards, Zelensky may have kind of proven with Kellogg's inside guidance that he's got some cards. Don't discount his cards. He's got an ace in the hole, or something like it. This is a much better and much more for better situation for Ukraine, a much more ambiguous situation for Russia than Trump realized, and that in the larger battle, which was, are we going to be involving ourselves in these foreign conflicts when we should be focusing on our problems at home? Well, there's an interesting aspect to the praise that Trump gave to himself for everything that he's done and all the successes that he has had that began the speech. Our economy is, you're all investing $17 trillion. You're all investing in our country. You're investing in our stock market. We've done this at the border. We've done that. We're the greatest country in the world. We're not in a crisis. We don't have to turn inward to fix our disastrous situation. I'm already leading us into the golden promised land. The logic of the isolationist right is that America is teetering on the balance of carnage and collapse, and that it is prudent to get ourselves out of involvement in the Middle East and in Ukraine because we don't have the bandwidth, given how horrible things are. Trump doesn't want to be retailing that message. This speech telegraphed that he is going into the 2026 elections trying to say, I've done it. We've turned a corner. America is great. And that means maybe we can do all kinds of stuff that we weren't doing before.
But that's still, I guess we're replacing, Trump's enemies are always accusing him of wanting to institute the 2 minutes hate, but it's actually the 2 minutes self-flattery that he's more prone to indulge in. But there is still this problem with how he perceives these conflicts. This is a civilizational battle from Putin's perspective. And I think that's the tension that you're describing within the administration. The civilizational battle that the administration wants to fight is happening more here at home. And so I think that whatever he's promoting in the lead up to the midterms, and he should be worried because the economy, although, the economy is sending out weird signals about where the country is headed, and same with the unemployment numbers, and people's sense of where we're headed is confused right now. So he does need to get a message on board there that they can relentlessly hammer home through the midterms. But I worry that by not understanding the civilizational battle that Putin thinks he's fighting, he might miss some opportunities as things shift on the ground again, as they will.
I think that's fair, but he is acknowledging what the amazing breakthrough was on Monday, is that he is acknowledging that Ukraine is fighting a civilizational battle, and that all things considered, he kind of likes Ukraine's civilizational battle better than Putin's civilizational battle.
Well, he also likes winners.
Right.
And so the tacit message of the Truth Social post was that actually Ukraine is doing much better than he had thought.
Right.
And Russia is doing worse. And so he does like the winners. He does like the powers that seem strong at any given moment. I think it's too early to say that America is going to become more involved in the conflict than it has been. And I think that Trump has kind of taken the position of mediator here. That was what Anchorage was about. He wanted to meet with Putin. Then he had met with Zelensky and the Europeans. Then he says, okay, well, now Zelensky and Putin need to meet, and I can come in and play a role when they're ready to sign the deal. That didn't happen. And so now Trump is rhetorically more on Ukraine's side. But he's just saying that he's going to continue selling weapons to NATO. That's all he's going to do. There's going to be no more big aid packages to Ukraine. We'll see if he authorizes this new platform, the longer range missiles that can possibly hit the Kremlin, which is what Zelensky wants to do. He did say that the next time MiGs or drones infiltrate NATO airspace, the NATO countries should knock them down. He did not say American planes will knock them down. And so I think he still kind of wants to be something of a charitable bystander
Oh,
toward to this conflict, as was exemplified in that post after the drones hit what didn't hit but went into Poland last week, where he said he posted on Truth Social, "What's up with that? Here we go." Like,
yeah.
like I don't know what does that even mean.
But it's still look, it's still I mean, let's say the football
Yeah.
was deep in Ukrainian territory
So
back in the Trump Vance Zelensky meeting, and
right.
and Vance knocked Zelensky down for a safety close to his 1 yard line, and Trump has moved the ball to the 40, still in Ukrainian territory, but it's
Yeah.
a huge. So I don't know.
I just think what Trump is
yeah.
more interested in doing is blowing up the cartel ships,
Right,
off the coast of Venezuela
Right.
or off the coast of the Dominican Republic.
right.
Again, that's not isolationism by any means,
No, it's
but that's where he wants to use force. It's
gunboat
not. It's
diplomacy.
not over.
There we have
And
it.
of
Right.
course he used force against Iran
Yeah.
in the moment of decision,
Right.
which we can't forget. But for him, force is extremely surgical, and it can't lead to unintended consequences.
That's American force.
There that so he's hitting these boats off of Venezuela, which is a line which is, first of all, working in conjunction with the cartels to cause trouble, and is also an ally of Putin.
The nation of Venezuela, you mean?
Yes. And he is striking Iran, which is also part of this collection of countries allied with Putin.
Right.
It makes a certain sense for him to now focus a little more tightly on Putin and Russia itself. He is
Right. Yes.
he has a hostile posture towards Russia's allies and partners here.
Look, I think just to move, because I want to move on to the Middle East stuff, but 6 months ago, it looked as though he was aligning himself with the people who were not only opposed to American involvement in the world, or like in this way, and in further deepening our quagmire supposedly in Ukraine, but with people who are actively hostile to Ukraine's efforts and claim that Zelensky is a monster who hates Christians and wants to, is shutting down free prayer and is a dictator and all of that. And he is basically saying, all things being equal, I like this guy better. He's better. Ukraine is better. That is a huge shift. Now, he's not going to expend political capital to shut the sort of Tuckerite Vance wing down. I don't think that's his purpose, is to say, you shut up now and let the Ukrainians fight. But he is the big thumb on the scale. And, that he has basically walked away from them to some degree. That's why I'm focusing on Kellogg, because I'm trying to figure out, everything with him usually involves people that he starts liking and listening to. It's just an important development. What the long-term effects are, it could be over in 2 weeks, but he is very flighty. But that he did it at all, and that he did it in conjunction with what he said at the UN and what's happened this week in relation to Israel, Gaza, and Hamas, is important, because he has said these guys in Ukraine are brave and they're trying to save their country. That's a new thing, right? As little as 2 weeks ago, he was still peddling this psychotic line that Ukraine started the war with tool when it didn't have the ability to fight it. That's crazy. It wasn't Ukraine that rolled the tanks into Ukraine. It was a bizarre thing to say. But he is basically explicitly linked in some ways in everybody's head, October 7th, the Hamas invasion of Israel with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And we are now very explicitly supporting Israel, and have been. And we are implicitly supporting Ukraine in a kind of moral framework.
Can I
It is
just
the moral
interrupt because
go ahead. Yeah.
there's one other element that we haven't touched on, I think, at all on the podcast is he's also said in recent weeks that America should take back Bagram Air Force Base
Yes.
in Afghanistan,
Yes.
which was, in my view, the beginning of the unraveling of deterrence that produced both the Ukraine
wars,
invasion and the October 7th
and the
attack.
end of the Biden administration.
Yeah, and the end of the auto pen. So that there is a more. You're right.
Stop for a second. Stop for a second.
I wanted to bring it up.
We got to just talk about the gallery. Okay, we got to talk about the gallery. Like the entire administration is like a stand-up comedy routine, or it's like an episode of Batman with Adam West. So he's put up this gallery of the presidents on the
way to the new Rose Garden Club.
The new Rose Garden in whatever. And so there's this gallery, and it's every president, and then Biden. Instead of a portrait of Biden, there is a picture of an auto pen.
This is very
okay.
It's a very self-interested point I want to make. But
sorry,
you say it's a stand-up routine. It's actually the Free Beacon come to life, because when we established the Washington Free Beacon in our kind of waiting area in our offices, we put up on the wall what we called the Wall of Legends, which was a sometimes rotating gallery of Republican presidents, kind of the pop conservative figures we sometimes talk about on the show, like Ollie North or G. Gordon Liddy, and then sometimes just jokes. Hulk Hogan was on there. Of course he is a hero. I'm not to say it's a joke, but he was non-political. But so when I see the gallery of presidents that now lines the corridor to the new Rose Garden Club, I was like, that's the Hall of Legends come to life. And it's the kind of a shocking moment to see all of your jokes manifest in reality. It makes one kind of think about consequences to one's actions.
So to move on to the Israel portion and the recognition of a Palestinian state by France and Britain and Canada and a bunch of other nations, the Trump saying in his speech flatly, as everybody in fact recognizes who is even remotely honest, that this is a reward, not a punishment for October 7th. Hamas is treating it that way. It should. And something struck me about this that I don't think anybody is really focused on. Though we've talked now, and the world has been talking about how Macron and Starmer in particular are living in countries that are being transformed by their Muslim minorities, which are of a very large size, 15% by some reckonings or more, very much voters totally aligned with their camp. The entire politics of their countries have been shifted to a kind of immigration versus anti-immigration framework, with the fact that Marion Maréchal, the head of the French nationalists, is almost certainly now in a stronger position than the non-nationalist anti-Macron politicians, and the Reform Party in Britain under Nigel Farage is showing kind of mind-blowing strength at the polls. So what are Macron, who was in a domestic political crisis in the summer, and Starmer doing? So you remember for 30 years when talking about politics in the Middle East, the line was, look, let's talk Turkey. You want to talk Turkey about what's going on between the U.S. and Israel and the Arab countries. Arab countries don't give a shit about the Palestinians. They don't care. They don't like them. They have to pay them off. They know they're thugs. They're grossed out by them. They're losers. But they're very useful because they can turn their populations toward hatred of Israel through propaganda, and thus keep their population from saying, hey, Cairo, why am I so poor? Hey, Riyadh, why are my life circumstances so lousy? And then they go, no, look, hey, squirrel, Palestine and Israel, the Zionists are coming. And the Arab street is hypnotized by this attack on Israel and focuses on that and doesn't focus on their own domestic troubles. The exact same thing is happening now in London and Paris. Starmer and Macron are not recognizing a Palestinian state because they believe that there will be a Palestinian state or because this is what Israel needs. They are trying to distract their restive base, the bases of their party, which are now Muslim, that's to say the most reliable voting bloc, right? That most reliable substantial voting bloc. And how are they doing it? Are they doing it by promising this benefit or that benefit or the other thing? No, they're going after Israel. They are trying to quiet their Muslim street and seduce their Muslim street through distraction. And that's one of the reasons why I think this is kind of laid an egg in a way that if it had happened at any other time in the last 30 years, the fact that, two major European countries and maybe more, and Canada, were actually saying, no, you know what, we recognize, formally, we now believe that Palestine exists, would have been an epical moment in modern history, political history. And it just seems to be like just another day in the world of, you're beating up a rabbi in the street of North London, you're throwing some Jew off a balcony in a banlieue, and you're recognizing a Palestinian state. And as Trump said, your countries are going to hell.
But in
right? That's what he said.
But in that sense, I think it is a move of desperation on their parts. And if you look, because they actually are doing a lot internally to crack down in the UK on the free speech of people who raise objections to things like, Muslim grooming gangs of men who are sexually abusing children in certain areas. It's like, we won't talk about that. If you post something on social media about these things, we'll come and knock on your door. And just last week, there was a pro-Palestinian march in, I believe it was in London, and a police officer is videotaped telling a Jewish man who is wearing a kippah, who is observing what's happening, to leave because he's identifiably Jewish. So he's just there observing this rally. But law enforcement is actually telling him to leave rather than keeping him safe, rather than making sure that it remains a peaceful demonstration. And that shift, when I saw that video, I thought, well, of course, they're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall now because they have no control over this population. They have given so much ground on free speech, on law, on entire neighborhoods in some of these cities, and they don't know what to do now. And that's partly why the populist right in these countries is rising. They are at least addressing head on, yeah, we have a problem with immigration. We got to deal with that. Now, some of it's fueled by racism, some of it's fueled by other dark ideas, but on a practical level, they're absolutely right. And it reminded me of the way in which our elite institutions and our mainstream media in this country for several years, while everyone pointed to the border and said, seems like a lot of people coming across that border, they're like, no, it's fine, you're racist. So that tension has been going on in Europe for a long time, and they have lacked leaders on the non-liberal side who actually kind of have looked away as well. And so the Conservative Party in the UK right now is reaping the whirlwind there too, because who's going to hollow out? It's not the Labour Party that Farage is going to hollow out. It's the Conservative.
I also think it's laying an egg because Israel is entirely shaping the facts on the ground as regards the future of Gaza. I mean, it's they can pronounce anything they want. Israel is forging ahead in this sort of last leg of its war in Gaza. There's no mechanism in place to bring this fantastical notion of a Palestinian state into being. There's nothing on the table. There's nothing. It is so divorced from what is actually happening regarding the territory.
Yeah, I'm with Abe. I think there's no Palestinian state to recognize.
Yeah,
and the mealy-mouthed Euro weenies, are saying, well, we don't mean Hamas is the legitimate government. It's okay. Well, then you mean the Palestinian Authority. But no one, not even the Palestinians, take the Palestinian Authority seriously. This is, just to maybe go into a slightly different aspect of the story, this is still the big remaining question about what happens to Gaza after the conclusion of the campaign in Gaza City and then the satellite camps nearby. It was, will Israel turn it over to a tightly managed Palestinian Authority or not? That was left out of the proposal under consideration in Trump's meeting with the Arab leaders at the UN this week, according to Amit Segal. And so I just think no one takes it seriously, and as a result, this gesture, which meant to placate not just the Muslim populations of these countries, but also the left, which is very powerful. The progressive left in these coalitions as well. They are the ones that are. I mean, it's hard to distinguish between the rhetoric coming from the progressive left and the rhetoric coming from the Al-Aqsa media outlets these days, right? So the big debate now is what will happen once these operations are concluded in the Gaza Strip.
Okay, so we should talk about Christine evoked the immigration issue, sort of being the tripwire. We both did the tripwire in Europe that is potentially going to be politically transformative in a way that it has suggestively been here. But I mean, I think we're talking about potential earthquakes in these countries. That is literally unthinkable leadership just 10 years ago. Sort of a version in the minds of the elites there of David Duke becoming president or something like that. Okay. Here we have enforcement of existing standard issue, existing immigration law, border security rules involving illegal immigrants who are sort of like prima facie not allowed to be on our territory, to be removed. A lot of the rhetoric about ICE commercials starring Kristi Noem and all of that directed toward sending the message here and across the border, just don't come, go back. It's not going to go well for you if you hang around here, and you are making a huge mistake by crossing the border. And the effects, according to all the numbers that we're seeing, are pretty astonishing. I mean, like literally no net increase in border crossings this year as compared to millions in previous years. Two issues with ICE, right? One is this horrible shooting yesterday. Several dead, all of whom seem to be detainees. The killer having done himself in, anti-ICE messages on his bullets. This is the third or fourth event in Texas involving assaults on ICE agents or attempted assaults on ICE agents in the last 3 or 4 months. This is a real thing. The rhetoric, the anti-ICE rhetoric, that is essentially one of the unifying conditions, not only of the progressive left, but of the union left and all of that, does seem to be crossing into real world behavior, which seems to me to be, aside from being evil, obviously, because these are law enforcement agents who are being targeted, and then tragic because they weren't hit and detainees were hit who were just being, taken into custody or whatever was going on with them, that they were exposed to this gunfire. But like they're who's going to benefit from this violence politically? It is literally a gift to Trump and the Republicans. It fulfills an argument that the left is careening off into violence. Violence against legitimate authority is something that even now most Americans find abhorrent in the extreme. One of the things that, like, we have we still have the death penalty for, even in states that don't like the death penalty, is killing a law enforcement officer. And it's as though they are handing Trump and ICE and everybody a just gigantic cudgel to beat them with next year. Vote for them, and you know what you're going to get? You're going to get a lot more ICE agents getting shot.
That's actually exactly what they are doing, because I think the distinction is between what we had under Biden were a lot of sanctuary cities and sanctuary policies, and we'll look the other way if the ICE agents come into our courtrooms, and we're not going to tell them that we have detained someone who's not legal so that they can rearrest them after they're released. And it was all done, kind of with a lot of sanctimony on the part of the left of, like, we're on the right side of history here. We're doing the right thing, even though they were actually enabling breaking of the law and an immigration crisis. What has shifted since Trump was reelected, I think, is that you see a lot of elected Democratic officials not just peacefully protesting, but physically attacking ICE agents, blocking driveways and entryways to federal facilities, and then going on cable news and boasting about what they did and encouraging others to fight ICE. And the kinds of posters and stickers and I see all around DC when I walk around are rather, it reminded me of when everyone in the 80s thought it was cool to have, like, the anarchy symbol on their t-shirts and, the Che poster and all that stuff. It's become a cultural symbol, the anti-ICE stuff. And you have a whole lot of elected Democrats in Congress who encourage it with their rhetoric, who encourage it by giving attention to the even the state level officials who are blocking these facilities. It is a culture of violence. I'm sorry. They are talking about violence. They are not just peacefully exercising their right to protest. That is a different thing, and that has shifted rather quickly.
And while this is happening, you have Democrats saying and passing laws against, why do ICE agents have to wear masks? Because there is a hot war against ICE coming from the left. That's why.
I think it's also they don't like. I think they should listen to Violet Affleck, and every ICE agent should say they're wearing a mask because they want to prevent long COVID. That apparently message from the daughter of Jennifer Garner and Ben Affleck, spoken from the stage of the UN General Assembly. How she got there, I don't know. She's 19 years old and apparently extremely neurotic.
Nepo baby power is
I
real,
think you
John.
just answered your own question when you named her parents.
Yeah, well, anyway, but I'm just saying, but there you can wear a mask. You should wear a mask for long COVID. So I think that could be we could come together as a country.
When Palestinian protesters can wear masks, but not the ICE agents.
Not ICE agents.
There's also can I also say, though, that Kristi Noem, not my favorite person in this administration, as I've mentioned before, the provocative posturing that the Trump administration did right at the beginning of the first term with regard to immigration, I kind of rolled my eyes at, because he was actually enforcing what he said he would do on the border, and I supported that as a policy-making thing. If you look at some of the polls now about how Americans feel about immigration, because the border's secure, now people are becoming more open to, actually immigrants are good for the country. So, and that shift has happened in recent months. I think the Trump administration needs to keep an eye on that, because some of the tone and rhetoric, I know people hate when I tone police, but if they want to actually point to what is going on the left in terms of the violent rhetoric and the violent behavior, then it would be useful for them to acknowledge that this is a victory for Trump, and the American people have supported what he did. So now we have to start talking about immigrants in a way that isn't, turning them into cartoons and mocking their tears and all that stuff.
Okay, well,
can I just make one point about the violence? I don't think we can ignore the rhetoric coming from the elected officials or former elected officials. The amazing Kamala is on her book tour. And in her first interview with Rachel Maddow, she said that Trump is a communist dictator. And the language of dictatorship, of fascism, that you hear it everywhere now. And for certain people, they take it seriously, and they think, well, if Trump is going to declare himself king or cancel the 2028 election, like Gavin Newsom just said the other day, that Trump is going to do, well, then violence must be the answer.
Right.
Right. And so I think that you talk about tone policing. I think that Democrats just need to wake up here and start toning down what the way in which they describe the actions of this administration. Now, they will not listen to me, of course, because they seriously believe that Trump signals the end of democracy. But when you broadcast that from your media 24/7, you're going to create violent offenders.
I said this the other day, but I want to repeat it. We talk people. It is a cliche when we talk about articles, for example, that go take a point and take it to its ultimate extreme about any subject, that people like us will say, well, that's irresponsible. That rhetoric that's an irresponsible use of your platform. So it sounds like it's hollow. It doesn't mean anything. It's just like just another adjective to use to be slighting or dismissive. But it does mean something, and this is what it means ultimately, which is ideas have consequences, and extreme ideas can motivate people in 1,000 different ways. And we now have the ability to get directly into the cerebral cortexes of unstable people with information that would have been, published an article in Ramparts in 1968 about how to make a Molotov cocktail. But unless you were, or the New York Review of Books, but unless you were a subscriber to those publications, and that was 100,000 people in a nation of 200 million or something, you weren't going to have the recipe, right? But now, want a Molotov cocktail? You just Google it, and you can have a Molotov cocktail. Similarly, you want to make an argument about how Jews killed Christ, and they're killing Christ again in the form of Charlie Kirk or whatever. You get it right into the head of somebody who's sitting in a basement, and he gets really upset, and then he goes, now you really do have a assembly line to the crossover from an idea into an actuality. It used to be for, that was where T.S. Eliot said there falls a shadow. There's no shadow necessarily anymore. And so, yeah, if Gavin Newsom is going on Stephen Colbert, the governor of the largest state in the country, and saying the president of the United States is going to cancel the 2028 elections, what could flow from that? Is that, I don't even know if the word irresponsible even can capture the enormousness of what he has done by issuing this into the public sphere.
By the way, an election where he's the front runner.
Right.
For his party's nomination.
No wonder he's worried they'll cancel it. Right? I don't know, but so does he not believe it, so he thinks he can say it? Or in other words, in the end, you wonder, Jimmy Kimmel didn't know it was coming for him because he thought he could say anything he wanted to say and nobody would get upset with him because everybody's upset with everybody and blah, 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 blah. And then he reaped the whirlwind for a couple of days, and then he came back on the air and he cried and he said he didn't mean to hurt anybody and blah, he's only for free speech and all of that. Newsom goes on his rival show and says the election of 2028 is going to be canceled. What are you going to do about it? Well, there are 20 people out of 330 million people in this country who might decide to do something about it. And it only takes one to kill 10. Or as we know in the case of Timothy McVeigh, to go back to a beloved negative figure on the Democratic liberal side, because the Timothy McVeigh shooting in 1995 revived the political career of Bill Clinton. One can kill 200. I mean, we are not, all of the evidence all the anecdotal evidence we have is that there is a snowball rolling down the hill on the left in which people are going to country clubs in New Hampshire and shooting them up, saying free Palestine. They aren't shooting up the congressional softball game. They're shooting up a chip and putt dinner at a country club. This is no joke. And these guys, and they're all acting, including writers from The Atlantic and stuff like that. You think these things don't have real world consequences? They have real world consequences. Like, get a hold of yourselves, or if you're not going to, you're gonna effectively end up with the result that you are so terrified of, which is no one's gonna hand the reins of authority to you because you're siding with disorder, decay, violence, death, and anarchy. So, like, get serious and like also listen.
Take a vacation. That's what they should just do.
Yeah, they should
just take a vacation.
Yeah. But again, like all this stuff I heard about Trump's speech, how we're a laughing stock and it's horrible. How about like listening to what he said? I mean, I understand if you're a climate change person, you hate the speech because he said that, the Green New Deal is ridiculous. And I understand that if you believe that the UN is wonderful, that you're mad that he said that it's not. But everything that he said is an arguable and extremely defensible position, including, by the way, and I want to finish on this one little point, because I had a little bit of a tussle about it on Twitter last night, including with people that are sort of on our side. So there was talk this week on MSNBC that James Comey, the former director of the FBI, is going to be indicted on charges of perjury. It has to be this week because the case, the inciting incident is we're reaching the statute of limitations on when you can be charged for it. And it seems to go back to testimony before the Senate in which Lindsey Graham said to him, did the FBI open an investigation into Donald Trump's campaign during the 2016 election? And Jim Comey said no. And we now know that the answer is yes. So did Comey perjure himself? Sounds like it to me, since Graham then said you would know if the FBI opened this investigation, correct? It's not like it happened and you as the FBI director wouldn't know about it. And he said, no, I would know about it. So he said, I would know about it, and no, there was no investigation. And there was an investigation, as we now know. So he said he would have known about it. But you would think, people say it's a hard case. It's not exactly an admission that whatever. I mean, and that may be true. I'm not an expert in criminal procedure or what it means to perjure yourself according to common law. But, part of the rule of politics is that you're supposed to police your own side. The decision to say, as people are now complaining with Trump, that you let your own side get away with perjury and criminal activity and stuff like that because the other side is worse. Well, I don't know. This could be a very prophylactic moment for America if James Comey is in fact indicted for perjury. That it seems to me, based on what I'm seeing, that he did in fact commit, because maybe then these guys will stop going before Congress and lying. Like, that would be good if they stopped going before Congress and lying. Alejandro Mayorkas went before Congress and lied. He was found in contempt of Congress for doing so. No action was taken by the Biden administration for which he worked. Maybe it would have been good if it did, even though he was one of theirs. Because if you do that, then you are creating a deterrent effect so that people don't go around lying about what they did. I mean, am I overestimating this?
I just think we will have to see if the grand jury returns an indictment, which grand juries have not been doing lately, especially in the District of Columbia. This case is in the Eastern District in Virginia. I think the grand jury would be in Alexandria. Lots of Democrats in Alexandria.
Yes.
So that's number one. Number two, if it goes to trial, it'd be quite a trial. And these charges have been floated before for Comey's testimony, and Trump employees have said, including the Trump employee that Trump just forced out and replaced, have said that there just wasn't enough there to get not only the indictment but a conviction. So I think this is playing with fire by the Trump administration. I really do.
You mean indicting him?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you go for an indictment, you have to have pretty solid grounds for thinking that you're going to get a conviction, or else it's going to backfire.
Fair enough. Okay. I'm just saying, I don't know, like the rules of the fact that we've lived now for, I would really say since the beginning of the Obama administration in a world in which.
Well, Brennan and Clapper lied during the Biden administration about drone attacks.
Yeah. I
mean, they never paid any price.
Yeah. Like, and obviously this is now ongoing in the Trump administration.
Well, the funny thing would be if it is this kind of deterrent effect, I assume that people just stop testifying before Congress, and then Congress will have nothing to do, because really the only thing that Congress does now is have these accountability hearings. And so,
right.
But I would add the context in this particular case with Comey, beyond obviously the fact that Trump wants to get him, is what's been going on with these prosecutors and how Trump has been trying to pressure prosecutors to do things to pursue political enemies in a way that is unusual. Perhaps it was going on behind the scenes as well in other administrations, and he's just doing what everybody else did, but it's still not the way the system has generally worked. And the fact that even people who he appointed are saying there's not enough here, and you can't pressure me to do that. That's a significant change.
And the Truth Social post from the weekend where he was complaining about Pam Bondi. Why haven't you brought the charges yet? Of course, that would factor into any trial too. Comey would say, "Look, this is all pretextual politics."
Yeah. Right.
Again, I think it's a very combustible move by the Trump administration if they do it.
Yeah, and having begun the podcast, as I say, supping and drinking in the ambrosia and nectar of the UN speech, I do want to say that every time there is something to praise in Trump, there is something to give you incredible pause or make you incredibly uncomfortable, and that's just what
you can take out your red hat, John. It's fine. We're in a safe space here.
I don't have a red hat. I don't have a red hat, and it would say "Make Israel." It would say "Keep Israel Great." Again,
I do want to say though that we had a special guest star appearance early in the. For those of you who don't watch us on YouTube but should subscribe, Matt's cat made an appearance to encourage you all.
Yes.
Just saying. So
I guess a fleeting appearance, but yeah.
Yes, with a red cap on.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be back tomorrow. For Matt, Christine, and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.